A whopping 34 players that played high school football in the state of Texas were drafted, right? Now, how many of them were drafted in the first round, right? Or first 2 rounds, I should say, 17 to 64, right? So that's about 26.5%. How many of them went to Texas or Texas A&M? Anybody? 0! Not a one! Zilch! Nada! The 2 schools that have the most money coming in of any schools in the union. Texas A&M, $219 million, $214 million respectively. 2 of the schools with the 2 of 4 largest recruiting budgets in the world. 0 in the first or second round. Like that's wild. Especially when you take into account Jalen Rager. He went in the first round. He went Texas Christian. He's from Waxahachie. Jeff Gladney also went to Texas Christian. He's first round. Wait, Jordan Brooks went to Texas Tech? Hello? Right? We're talking about 2 guys that Matt Wells is out here. I'm sorry. I got a hard time getting through this one because that's not the way it's supposed to be. Now, we all know that Texas is one of the most talent-rich states in the union when we're talking about football, and it certainly has enough high school football talent to go around. Let's just start with it's a large landmass state, and before it was a state, it was a frigging country, right? So they know how to do this. They're very pro-business, which means they also put a lot of money into the things that they like. It's the reason that Southern Methodist football was thought about, right? It's the reason we can say things like Craig James wasn't as fast as Eric Dickerson, but he was plenty fast enough for the Pony Express. We continue to go down this, and okay, bright news for Texas in particular is you look at their 2021 recruiting class, and all 8 of their commitments right now are from the state of Texas, whereas Texas A&M only has 2 of the 5. Speaking of which, Texas A&M is ranked 37th, and Oklahoma is pushing toward 50. Get on it, Lincoln Riley. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But you also got to go back to 2009 for the last time that Texas posted, 10 wins prior to the Sugar Bowl victory over Georgia that didn't have the Paycom Jim Thorpe Award winner there. And yeah, you're also looking at a 2017 class that Tom Herman had to cobble together because he was basically taking over a lot of what Charlie Strong had. And we get lots of data to show that Texas has been recruiting well, right? Particularly nationally. And when we look at the 2019 class, which was, a top 5 class, in 2022, they ought to put in at least 1 first rounder, right? And even for next year, you're seeing Sam Cosmi and Caden Stearns are being mock drafted in the first round. But that also depends on whether or not Caden Stearns can stay healthy and what position they're going to have Sam Cosmi playing in this revamped offense with Mike Yursich as its offensive coordinator when Tom Herman basically fired himself as play caller and fired his offensive coordinator, Tim Beck, from strategic analyst, right? And now I kind of looking at Ohio State and North Carolina and Tennessee because they're in the top 3 of the 2021 cycle right now. But I was just thinking, what if Tom Herman had just held what he got at Ohio State, didn't take the job at Houston, didn't take the job at Texas? Perhaps Ohio State is living that Texas life. It ain't fun right now, right, to be a Longhorn fan. It ain't fun right now to be an Aggies fan, especially as you really need the money coming in and a time when everybody's going to be hurting for money, if for no other reason than there was no NCAA tournament, right? I also think it's wild that you can note Texas has 4 draft picks from this past draft, and 14 came from LSU, and yet you look at the Aggies, and we're letting them skate because they just, a couple years ago, hand Jimbo Fisher a $75 million contract because he was able to win at Florida State. Also was former coordinator of Nick Saban. Everybody's trying to get that Nick Saban energy and that Nick Saban grease. It ain't for everybody, though, and that's kind of the point. That said, I believe Texas, and by association, A&M will at some point be back because of sheer numbers, right? We know that if they would just do what Mac Brown did and recruit the hell out of Texas and just commit to it, they ought to be super fine, right? And yet, it seems to be harder for them than anybody else. I don't understand how you can look at Texas and not expect them to be good. It's the reason why we're also tired of national media types telling us that Texas is back because the numbers say every year that they should be, and yet they underperform. They do the least with the most. Put a conference together of Michigan, Texas, Texas A&M, USC, and you probably got a bunch of teams that people would watch that ain't ever going to win a college football playoff national championship. Just not going to happen. Whether it's coaching or development or staff turnover or whatever excuse you want to give them, they ought to be there. When Oklahoma could take a 3-star recruit in Kenneth Murray Jr. and turn him into a first-round draft pick, despite him playing for 2 different coordinators, 2 different assistants, and 2 different schemes. When Oklahoma can reach down and go get a CeeDee Lamb away from a Texas, away from an LSU, and turn him into the 17th overall pick. When OU can put together a junior college prospect who was working at a theme park, bring him in, give him 2 years, and turn him into a first-round draft pick. When Oklahoma can go get D.D. Westbrook off the scrap pile, turn him into one of the best wide receivers in college football and a Heisman finalist as a receiver. When OU could take a walk-on quarterback from Lake Travis right in Texas' backyard and turn him into not just a Heisman Trophy winner, but one of the most memorable college football players of all time. I don't get why we would continue to let Texas slide, or A&M for that matter. Because when you look at what this is all about, a breeding ground for the NFL, and the NFL uses it as marketing like tremendously well. It's the reason why college football continues to hold up as a great minor league and perhaps the best minor league of all time. They're just not that good at it. And what would it take for them to be good at it? I submit to you, it would take just saying we're going to recruit this state that we love and that we live in. I mean, Longhorns are the flagship university in a proud state, in a state that has produced Earl Campbell, that produced Adrian Peterson, who chose OU over A&M in Texas, in a state where you can throw a rock and hit greatness at any level, that produced the greatest high school football player of all time in Kyler Murray, right? And then you manage to screw that up, A&M, because it turns out the dude does better when he's playing 2 sports at once opposed to the 1 sport. Texas A&M hasn't won 10 games since Johnny Football, right? Really, put this stuff into perspective and think about it and wonder who's to blame. Because it's not as if they don't have money. It's not as if they're not spending money. And I get it. If you don't win, usually you get canned. But for whatever reason, Del Conte is letting this thing ride with Tom Herman, right? They got no choice but to let it ride for now with Jimbo Fisher, just looking at that buyout and what that agreement says. But something has to give, and it better give real quick, fast, and in a hurry, or it's going to go off the rails real quick. Can't make $219 million in 1 year while Tech produces $90 million in a year and expect us to let it slide when Tech has guys that are drafted in the first round and you don't.